Hello and welcome once again to another midnight special broadcast from Cardano World. And we're going to be listening to a live broadcast that was produced about 6 hours ago, 6.5 hours ago, on the former Twitter space, which is now known as the X platform, owned by partially owned by Elon Musk. And the broadcast is about midnight, the new blockchain from IOHK Global, one of the partners, which is a new blockchain uh, conceptualized from Charles Hoskinson. Uh, and it's been developed. It is running live now, I believe, on DevNet. And we're going to listen to Charles Hoskinson speaking with Input Output and the Midnight Network on this new revolutionizing data protection blockchain, which has been developed to protect its users' data from being known by third parties, because we don't want to see people's personal data uh, released and given up to the wrong people. So here we go. Let's begin this meeting and listen in.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hey, Charles, how are ya?
It's good to be here, Annie. How about you?
It's good to be here. I'm Annie Hemish, everybody, the Communications Director here at IOG, and we are excited to be with you all today for an exciting discussion about Midnight, the new data protection blockchain. A couple friendly reminders before we start the event to always be kind and share your thoughts in a respectful manner. And as a reminder, we're not taking live questions, but our team is collecting all of your questions, and if we cannot address them here today, we will work to answer them across our social channels in the coming days. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and we hope you enjoyed this chat. Now, let's get right into it. I want to introduce our co-host, CEO and founder of IOG, Charles Hoskinson, and Midnight CEO, Aran Barak. Well, of course, Charles needs no introduction. For those of you new to our community, Aran joined the IOG family earlier this year to help lead and build out the business unit creating Midnight, the new data protection protocol we announced last year at ScottFest. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here. It's great to be here.
We'd like to take a step back and first talk about why do we need Midnight? So, Charles, do you want to share a little bit more about the story behind Midnight?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, Midnight is one of my favorite projects, and we've been working on it now in the conceptual stage, the prototype R&D stage, and now we're starting to get to the product level for almost 5 years. And what's special about Midnight is it's really a realization of kind of the model that we built Cardano for, which is Cardano had this Cardano asset and settlement system. And that's kind of the layer one. And that's where Ouroboros lives, and extended UTXO and Plutus. And really the intention there is that's like the best place in the world to issue an asset. That's the best place in the world to securely do smart contracts and to establish a secure consensus backbone. But it's not a service layer in that it does everything to everybody. So you have ventures like, for example, World Mobile, where they want to be a telco, or maybe you have another venture like Singularity, where they want to be a big AI thing and eventually have a decentralized LLM or something like that. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to try to be everything to everybody. So we recognized very early on in 2016 this idea that you have to allow a service layer to form, and that service layer basically is able to do interesting and very specialized things. So one of the things we recognized was that there really does need to be a system that kind of innovates in three different directions at the same time. Similar to how Cardano innovated in scalability, interoperability, and governance, we needed to have a system that first it paid homage to all the advancements that were happening in the Snark world, which are some of the most exciting things you could see. I mean, there's just things like anon-creds and all the Snark work that's been done for recursive Snarks and roll-ups and these things. And that technology is not only amazing, it allows you to do things you just simply can't do in normal blockchain systems. For example, when you start adding identity into transactions, well, you need to actually increase your level of privacy or else you've doxed everybody that's there. So how do you associate freedom of association, commerce, expression, these types of concepts in a world where you still do want to do maybe regulated business, like a security token, or maybe you want to identify who's the author of an NFT, for example, so you can pay royalties to them, or these types of things. So you needed to have something that put those capabilities together, and we created this amazing piece of IP called Kachina, which is really a next generation virtual machine that allows you to do private smart contracts. And marrying that with some really top shelf cryptography is kind of that first dimension we wanted to innovate in. The second dimension is we really wanted to figure out how do you build a blockchain that is able to be kind of a regulation layer and a governing layer for the data economy. So you have these massive repositories of information, exabytes and yottabytes of information that Google possesses and all these institutions possess, and they're using it, for example, to mine Gemini and all these things for AI, or they use it to micro-target you for ads, and you don't own anything and you don't control that. So what's happening with GDPR and the self-sovereign identity movement is that people are saying, hey, give me my data back. I want to be in control of my identity, my life. I want to be in control of my information. And we see this realized with great products like Brave, for example, and what they're trying to do with bats. Well, the problem is there's no way to regulate this or govern this on a blockchain sense because we don't really understand how to combine those two concepts together. Yet, when you look at the growth of the industry, this is where the greatest growth is going to be. Like trillions of dollars worth of assets are going to end up in our industry, and they have to end up in this capacity. And then finally, when you talk about that whole separation of an asset and settlement layer from a service layer, you need to have a consensus model that allows you to do that. And so this is really the first case study in introducing a concept of partner chains where you're in a position where you have multi-resource consensus, so you can borrow security from Cardano, but then you're also allowed to use additional consensus algorithms. So you'll see people say things like, oh, I'm proof of stake or I'm proof of work. I say, well, why do you have to separate your peanut butter and jelly? It'd be great to put them together. I like PB&J sandwiches. So how about we do proof of work and proof of stake at the same time, or other components? So really what this does is it introduces this concept of Minotaur, which is another piece of IP that we created years ago, and it's a great piece of research that we and some professors at University of Illinois did together. And this will now brings that into the industry and allows us to have a much better service layer model than other competing ecosystems, and it kind of aligns all the incentives together towards interoperability. So it's from a technological viewpoint probably the most sophisticated product that Input Output's ever worked on, and it's the product of love, an enormous amount of research here, and I dare say it's probably the first fourth generation cryptocurrency. So cryptocurrency that inherits all those capabilities of the last three generations, but it's the first to bring to the market multi-resource consensus, identity, and Snark technologies like roll-ups and recursion and private smart contracts to bear. And I think this is the thing that is really going to supercharge our ability to move into completely new industries and kind of be the preferred bridge between TradFi and DeFi, and allow us to talk about completely new concepts of intellectual property, data economy, and regulated finance and these types of things. So it's a super exciting project, and certainly the most complicated because there's just so much technology under the hood, and it's really been the labor of love of an amazing team and amazing leadership, especially under Iran. He's built a great culture at Midnight.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that overview, Charles. I guess we should now discuss what is Midnight. We know blockchains have been around for a while, but there have been concerns around the public nature of the technology, with some saying that this has stifled its adoption. So, Iran, can you talk to us more about the technology behind Midnight?
Absolutely, Annie, and excited to be here and share more details. As Charles laid out the vision of why, we wanted to go and see how we can fulfill this vision and drive enterprise adoption. We understood that we needed to build a proposition that goes beyond what's available in the market today. Because the regular elements or standard elements of blockchain, whether it's decentralization, security and stability, scalability, are not enough. We needed to find how we can help enterprises deploy and use this technology. It's not just if you build it, they will come, but how do we make customers successful? So in that respect, we really looked at addressing some of the main pain points that enterprises see today with blockchain technology. First, we looked at confidentiality of sensitive data. No enterprise in their right mind is going to go and deploy that into the public sphere. They have to be protected. We also looked at risks around service availability. You have to be able to access the resources when you need them. It's not enough that they are fast or scalable or great. If they're not available, it doesn't mean anything. We needed to look at operating costs. How do we can budget for what we're doing? How do we manage all the issues with tokens and wallets? And how do we support policies, business policies, whether they are for the business or regulatory compliance? We needed to do all that within the public chain infrastructure. So Midnight is really trying to bring that all together to be a blockchain-based technology that empowers data protection apps. We want to help developers have the transparency of a public ledger, but at the same time shield the sensitive data and use zero-knowledge proofs and shielded tokens. So looking back at what I just mentioned as main challenges, here's how Midnight goes about to tackle them. First, we built a data and metadata protection from the ground up. We wanted to keep both sensitive data kind of protected so that participating parties can do what they need to do and also keep the participating activities and parties shielded as needed. So we have both a public and a private ledger so you can do selective disclosure. You're getting essentially the best of both worlds. Second, we needed to guarantee capacity. We wanted to have service availability when you need it. It's not enough that Midnight is fast, and it will be fast. But imagine you building the fastest train possible. But if you can't get a ticket to that train, then it doesn't really matter how fast that train is. We wanted to make sure you have access to the resources when you need them, and then make sure that they're as fast as possible. Third, we wanted to think about cost. We needed to really be innovative around our tokenomic design. We need to enable enterprises to know how much to budget for the next period when they're operating applications on Midnight. And we wanted to even give them the option to pay for that usage with fiat. So they don't need to worry about holding crypto on their balance sheet or managing wallets. They need to feel like this is yet another cloud service like anything else that they have out there. And finally, we needed to be regulatory friendly. This is table stakes. We've got so many people covered today by privacy laws like GDPR, HIPAA, SOX, etc. We needed to enable dApps that needed it to have both the transparency and the compliance where is needed. Shield whatever is needed, unshield whatever is not needed, so they can be compliant with whatever regulation is imposed on them. So again, data protection for data and metadata, guaranteed capacity to ensure service availability, predictable costs on a public chain with the option to pay with fiat, and be regulatory friendly that meets business policies and compliance. So you put all that together and you got something that is absolutely compelling for an enterprise to be able to roll out, deploy, and use. But we knew that was not going to be enough. It's not just to love the enterprises, we need to love our developers as well and make their life as easy as possible. We didn't want to go into a domain-specific language. We're using TypeScript for writing smart contracts. This is one of the most widely available programming languages out there. We're going to provide plugins and tools and libraries for common use cases of smart contracts, and we're going to build an amazing collaborative community from day one. We really feel all these things would come together to make something that the market will love, appreciate, and adopt. And I can't thank enough Charles and the team who've been working on this for so long as they brought this together, and we're excited to see that in the market.
Thanks, Aram. on. The passion here is contagious, and it's always good to share some examples for those who are unfamiliar with such groundbreaking technology. Charles, what are some of the use cases where you believe Midnight will have a major impact on the world?
Well, if you look at where the world is going, one of the biggest movements right now is rebuilding the entire world towards net zero. So a lot of people want to reduce carbon. But really what they're talking about under the hood is we want to rebuild business processes on a global basis towards a particular outcome where we remove or change things in our supply chains and our manufacturing processes towards a particular end. It doesn't really matter if your goal is get rid of carbon or get rid of asbestos or get rid of CFCs or whatever that global treaty is. You have to track stuff, monitor stuff, audit things. And so from a supply chain perspective, the issue is there's no real good way of getting supply chains blockchain quite together yet. There's been a lot of attempts with Hyperledger Fabric, for example, the famous deal that IBM did with Maersk, and they tried to pursue that, and a litany of other false starts. But the reality is no one's cracked it yet. So when you talk about Midnight, you say, well, data protection, data confidentiality, these types of things, a regulating function. We're not talking about compliance with necessarily the SEC or something like that. You're talking about, okay, a consortium of people get together and they want to prove that everybody in the supply chain is not lying. They're actually being honest about what goes into the chain and how things move through it, who's touched it. But you can't reveal on a public ledger all of that information, or else you'll run into a situation where Samsung gets to know how many screens Apple is buying and producing for their iPhones. Or you'll get to know your oil capacity if you're Shell, and ExxonMobil now gets to know that, or an oil trader gets to know that. Or if you're a hedge fund, you get to know, basically what the positions are of your competitors, or these types of things. So you can't disclose in a public global sense, but yet you need a public global infrastructure in order for everybody to play by that same set of rules. So these are some examples. Another would be private medical records. So one of the things we all want to do, I have a clinic, we have 4,000 patients. I would love to be able to find a way to mine those medical records and work with other electronic medical record systems so we can ask population questions and treatment questions. For example, how many of my patients have heart disease over the age of 50 who also suffer from diabetes, and maybe they have mobility problems, and what were the treatment outcomes based upon certain medication types? That's a really expensive public health question to ask. And what if I'm able to just mine that, get an answer to it, but I don't reveal any personally identifiable information of the people? That's a great real life use case. It's worth trillions of dollars in aggregate across the entire world for drug development, public health decisions, and ultimately makes us healthier and safer from a healthcare perspective. Also enables us to share medical records and other things amongst each other without necessarily giving up the value of those underlying assets or the custody of those underlying assets. But there's one thing that's important to understand about the use cases. None of these require a universal backdoor inside the system. And I noticed early on when people were talking about Midnight, there seemed to be this concept that like there would be a compromised snark, or the government would actually have the ability to like look at things inside the system. That's not how you build these things. You build them just like Zcash is built or other things, where it's a universal concern. But the difference is, because it's programmable, you, the application developer, can decide the disclosure regime. Because obviously you'd like to disclose, if you're a corporation, to members of your company, the business of your company, but you don't want your competitors to see that. And you basically get to build those structures in a much easier way. And as Ron mentioned, doing that in TypeScript with very familiar libraries, very familiar approaches, means that you have a lot of developer productivity, the same type of productivity we have with normal web applications. But then you gain all the hard stuff for free, because that gets compiled down, and kind of these elements of Kachina will take care of those types of things that make it really difficult in practice to do zero-knowledge cryptography. So I'm super excited about this, because there's just so many things. Security tokens are another example, where we want to trade stocks, but there's a broker-dealer regime, and so there has to be a third party that's involved in that. And that's just how regulation works. I'd love to see STOs on DEXs and trading there, and have fully automated compliance on that side. I'd love to see supply chain, especially on the ESG side. I'd love to see a litany of these types of use cases. Intellectual property is another example, a licensing regime of the intellectual property, where you can prove you know something, but you don't have to reveal what you know. until people purchase it, and then there's a secure way of transiting it. It's a super exciting next generation, and I think it's one of the biggest upgrades and enhancements to the broader Cardano ecosystem to have this service layer available, and for applications to be able to start being able to call that capability and use that capability amongst other ecosystems as well. The service layer is being designed to talk to Ethereum and Bitcoin and others. So it's really a universal stack for those private things that we want to do to bring blockchain into legacy business.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Hoskinson explains his vision, and Midnight Network explains their mission to integrate privacy and personal data protection into all the smart contracts on the Cardano blockchain. And this is a major watershed moment for Cardano and all its developers and all of Cardano users and the Cardano community, because in the future Cardano is going to be the #1 blockchain, the most advanced blockchain in the world, which it already is now, but in the future you're going to see some serious stuff. That's all I have for you today, ladies and gentlemen.